So what I want to really talk about today is your analysis of the play and give you some ideas, give you some thoughts on different directions that you could take your paper in when you write your paper. Again, do 2 weeks from today, this paper. And so then talk about the themes, talk about the characters. But before I get to that, I do want to talk very quickly about changes between the movie and the play, things that are different. We watch the movie in class, you're writing your paper about the play, and there are some subtle differences between the play and the film. Now, I will say that the film was based very closely on August Wilson's play. August Wilson adapted the play into a script for a film. The movie came about because Denzel Washington, Viola Davis were on Broadway performing Fences, working with August Wilson while they were doing that. And then Denzel was like, well, how about we actually film this and make it into a movie so it's not just audiences in New York that can come to the stage and watch us perform it, but we can actually put it out there. And again, because of that, Viola Davis ends up winning the Oscar. All the performances everybody delivers in this film are amazing. Obviously, you get the big names of Denzel and Viola, but you also have Stephen Henderson as Bono. You've got Russell Hornsby as Lyons. You've got Giovanna Depo, who is an amazing actor, and I try to watch everything he's in because he's great. He plays Corey. You got the little girl who plays Raynell even. She's been in a lot of stuff. She was just recently in the movie, the Venus Serena Williams, Will Smith movie, King Richard. That he won that Will Smith just won the Oscar for a year or two back. The little girl who plays Raynell in Fences plays the young Venus Williams in that. Everybody in the movie, other than Denzel and Viola Davis, who you recognize and you know their names, everybody else is somebody that you're like, I've seen that guy and stuff. What's he from? And it takes a minute maybe that you click, or you have to check him on IMDb. But everything they've been in, like the guy that plays Bono was just in Dune, too. And so yeah, they're all phenomenal actors. They all do such a great job. But there's some choices that they made as actors. There's choices that Denzel made as a director that are slight alterations to how we might read the play. A lot of those are down to the logistics of a movie versus a play. In a play, you have a very limited amount of space. You got your stage that you are on, and that's it. And so in the play, everything that happens in the family's backyard of their house. But when you watch the movie, you can change locations, and it's not a big deal. And a movie should change locations. It shouldn't all be set in one place. It should be, showing you different locations. So the movie begins with Troy and Bono at work, doing their jobs as, sanitation. And then we see them getting off work. And we see them walking home, walking to Troy's house. And we see them walking up the street and going around back to the alley. And then they have a conversation back there. And then they go into the house. And the conversation continues. And we get scenes in the kitchen and scenes in the bedroom upstairs. That in the play, all of that happens in the backyard. And so that's kind of a difference that I wanted to point out, because it does kind of change some things of the dynamics of certain scenes. For instance, really the biggest changes come in the second half in Act 2. So I'm scrolling down here. We get to Act 2, Scene 1. And that's the scene in which Troy reveals to Rose that he's been having an affair. And in the play, Act 2, Scene 2, just then starts right back up. It is 6 months later, it says. In the movie, we can see that passage of time. In the movie, we get a montage of scenes of it's the fall, and there's leaves on the trees, and they start to fall off the trees. And then it's winter, and the snow is falling in the backyard. And then it comes to spring again. And we can see that passage of time, and we see the family doing things in that passage of time, like Troy keeping an eye on Gabe. Gabe goes to a cemetery where he's eating his lunch, and he's found a grave there that says mother. That's not actually Gabe's mom. Gabe and Troy are from Mississippi. And Troy tells us that he hasn't seen their mom since she walked out on his dad when he was little, when he was young. Gabe, because of his fractured mental state, has just kind of chosen a grave that he's found that says mother on it and is treating this like it's his mother's grave. And Troy's keeping an eye on him. That's not in the play at all. But it's showing us the transition of time, the passage of time. In the movie, we see Troy digging the hole to put the posts for the fence in. And then we see the posts going in. And then we see the slats along the fence going in. And we see the fence getting more built. Again, in the play, it just jumps to later. And when it does jump to later, there's this conversation that Rose has with Troy, where Rose is telling Troy, I want you to come home after work. And Troy says, I come home every night of 365 days a year. And she says, that's not what I mean, and you know it. You're still going to see Alberta. And Troy says, I've got to. She's pregnant. She's, in fact, about to go into the hospital because they think she might have the baby early. I got to go. I have a responsibility. And that's one of the themes of the play, responsibility, which we'll come back to and talk about more. In the play, that scene happens in the backyard. In the movie, that scene happens that Rose goes to meet Troy at work. And I think that works so much better in the film. Because the idea of the symbolism of the fence, you know, the play's called Fences, and the fence is symbolic. Rose sings, Jesus, build a fence around me every day. And she wants the fence built, and Bono explains to them at one point, some people build fences to keep people out. Other people build fences to keep people in. Rose loves you. Rose wants to keep a hold of you. And that's the symbolism of the fence. This is where the family gathers, inside the fence. And then when Alberta dies, she was outside the fence. And so Troy then opens the window in the movie and like rails and screams at Death. Says, Death, you stay on the other side of that fence. I'm going to keep my family inside of this fence. And you don't come until you're coming for me. And if you want to come at me, then I'm ready for you anytime you want, he says. The fact that that scene then happens, this scene happens in the film outside the fence at Troy's job. And they're standing, the blocking of the scene too is like Rose is standing way over here in the alley, and Troy comes out, and there's such distance between the two of them in that scene. It plays out better in the film that they're able to change the location. And so in the film, what happens is they have that conversation, and the scene ends, and it cuts to later that night after Troy has went to the hospital to see Alberta, and then he's come home that night and he's sleeping in the bed. The phone rings, and they get the news that Alberta has died, given birth to the baby. And it's two separate scenes, set on the same day, but separated by some time. Now it's the middle of the night. Now it's in their bedroom. Alberta has intruded on their space in the bedroom. In the play, that's all one scene that happens in the backyard. That they're having the conversation, the phone rings, Rose goes into the house to answer the phone and comes back out and tells Troy the news. It works, but it's limited to the logistics of a stage. And I think it works a bit better in the film that we're able to have that in two different locations and that we're able to cut between those scenes. Something similar happens later in Act 2, Scene 4. What is one scene in the play is 3 scenes in the film. In the film, Troy is coming home from work while Corey is swinging the bat at the baseball that's hung by a rope to the tree. He's swinging at it, and when Corey sees that Troy's coming, Corey leaves as Troy then gets home, and he goes into the house, and Rose is leaving at that exact moment to go to the bake sale at the church, she says. And Lyons has dropped off money for him that Lyons borrowed from Troy. And so he takes that money and he goes to Taylor's. And he meets with Bono at Taylor's. And then when he's done with that, he comes back to the backyard. And he's drinking by himself in the backyard. In the play, all of that happens in the backyard. And again, I think it's better in the film that we split it up and that we're able to change locations. Because in particular, we've heard about Taylor's all through the play. It's a place that Troy goes to escape his responsibilities. He hangs out with the boys, playing checkers or dominoes. He's having drinks. It's where he met Alberta. But when we finally see him at Taylor's, he's drinking alone in the middle of the afternoon. There's one other guy at the bar, and they're not even talking to each other. They're not sitting together. He's at the other end of the bar, and Troy's just sitting there by himself. And it goes to show the distance that has come about in Troy's life because of the mistakes that he's made. It illustrates that very well, that he used to, on a Friday afternoon, come home in the backyard with Bono and Lyons, and everybody would chat and goof off, and they'd have their drinks, and it'd be a good time. They were inside the fence, but now he's outside the fence and he's alone. And Bono comes in and says, hey, I haven't been able to keep up with you. I haven't seen you in so long. Troy took that promotion at his job. Now he's a driver of the truck. But that means, even though it got him a raise, even though it's an easier job, that he's disconnected from the guy who's his best friend that he worked alongside for years. They're not on the same route anymore. They don't see each other anymore. Some of that's because of the logistics of Troy getting this new job, but some of it's also because of the mistakes that Troy has made that have landed him in this position that he's drinking alone by himself on the middle of the afternoon in a bar. Nobody around. And again, I think that works better in the film than it does in the play. If he's in the backyard, he's inside the fence. If he's at Taylor's, he's outside the fence. It just seems symbolically, visually, a little bit better. But in the end, there is still something to be said by the fact that the scene ends with he's sitting alone in the backyard and everybody else has scattered. And then Corey comes back, and then the physical altercation comes about that ends with Corey getting kicked out of the house. We'll come back to that in a bit too. We'll talk about that more in a bit. But again, I just wanted to kind of mention it here as a slight change between the play and the film. Another change that's in that same scene, Act 2, Scene 4, is that in the movie, Rose is leaving and says, Lyons stopped by and dropped off this money. In the play, we see that. Lyons comes by and drops off the money. We see Lyons in that scene. And there's a little bit where Corey and Lyons talk to each other. Where Corey, it's revealed, has just graduated high school and he's trying to decide what he's going to do next, and Lyons is giving him some advice as he then heads out. This interaction between Corey and Lyons doesn't happen in the movie. This scene is cut. You might question, okay, well, why? One reason, I think, is down to the logistics of making a movie versus the logistics of a play, is that actor who plays Lyons, if it's in a play, is just backstage, waiting for his next time to come on stage. So it's very easy for him to come back out. Whereas in a movie, that's going to be an extra couple of days, perhaps, maybe just one, but maybe 2 days, where he's required to be available and be on set. And I know that at the time this movie was made, Russell Hornsby, who plays Lyons, was on a show on NBC called Grimm. And I kind of wonder, did he have a scheduling conflict? Is it as simple as like, oh, I'm supposed to shoot this scene, but I can't. I've got to be on the set of my TV show instead, and we'll just have to cut that bit. Maybe. But symbolically, I would say I think I like it better with this out, with this cut. Because it means then that the first time that we see Corey and Lyons talk to each other is when Troy has died at the end of the play. In the movie version, the first time that they interact with each other is at Troy's funeral, like when they're about to go to Troy's funeral. And I think that's actually better in a way. Because, Troy is 50-something years old. When he was about 17, he had Lyons, who's about 34 now. And then he goes to jail, and he comes out of jail, and he meets Rose, and they have Corey, who throughout the major part of the play is 17. And then he cheats on Rose and has Raynell and has this baby. And so there's a gap, a big gap between each of his 3 children. And it highlights that gap between them if we don't really see them interact with each other until the day they're going to bury their dad. They all have that in common, that they all have the same dad, but they're all in different stages of life. Raynell doesn't really know Corey because Corey moved out, got kicked out, went into the Army and hasn't been, the Marines, and hasn't been around. But she knows stories about Corey. And Lyons and Corey, we never really see them connect as the 2 sons of Troy until the final scene, until we get to the end. And so by cutting this, I think it adds some weight to their final conversation that they have in the last scene. So again, if I had to guess why this bit got cut, I would say it's probably because of scheduling conflicts, but it ended up working to the film's advantage. There is one other cut, and this one I don't understand. This one I don't get. It again is from when Corey and Lyons are having a conversation at the house on the day that they're there to bury Troy. Raynell goes upstairs to change. Rose is in the kitchen. And there's this moment where Corey and Lyons are standing in the living room and they're talking to each other about their dad. And in the play, there's 3 lines more of dialogue than there are in the film. That conversation starts a different way. It begins with Lyons saying to Corey, "So I hear you're thinking about getting married." Corey says, "Yeah, I done found the right one. Lyons, it's about time." Then Lion says, me and Bonnie been split up about 4 years now, about the time Papa retired. I guess she just got tired of all them changes I was putting her through. We've been hearing about Bonnie and his relationship with Bonnie all through the play, and to know that they split up. Again, that's not in the movie. It's not talked about in the movie. And more importantly, the idea that Corey is dating somebody, is thinking about settling down, that his reason for wanting to get out of the Marines is that he wants to settle down. He wants to be done with his life in the Marines and everything that he's got to go through there, and he wants to get married, get a house, and get a job. And I think it adds to his realization in the end about his father. Corey has carried this hatred of his dad for years, the shadow that he talks about. And Rose tells him, that was just you growing into yourself. Your daddy wanted you to be everything that he wasn't, but he also wanted you to be everything that he was. He did his best. He meant to do more good than he meant to do harm. Rose says all of that to Corey in the end. And Corey starts to kind of question that. And I'll talk about that more in just a minute. But this bit here kind of foreshadows that. Because one thing that Troy was always trying to say to Corey is, learn a trade so you know how to do something that they can't take away from you. You don't want to mess around with sports because it's not going to get you anywhere. Learn a trade, get a job so you have money to take your girlfriend out, so you can build a house, you can build a family. That's the right way to live. Troy made a lot of mistakes in his life, and he's afraid that Corey might make similar mistakes. He's trying to prevent Corey from making those mistakes. And Corey doesn't see that. Part of it because there's a communication breakdown between the two of them, which, again, we'll talk about more in just a minute. But some of it he's internalized. Some of it he's taken to heart, because this right here shows that he wants to do what his dad was always advising him to do. Get a job, settle down, get married, get a house. Now, I had somebody, one of the students in my Monday, Wednesday class say to me when we talked about this on Wednesday of last week, that he kind of liked it without this. That it means then that the realization that maybe Troy was trying to do good for him comes at the end of the play rather than starting to get dropped in here. And I can see that. But I also do kind of question, why cut this? It's 3 lines of dialogue that they're already in this scene. Because the next bit is Lion saying, I always knew you was going to make something out of yourself. Your head was always in the right direction. And Lion says that. That's how the conversation begins in the film. In the play, there's just a little bit more before that. And it's like, oh, why'd you cut that? But again, that's the great thing about watching a play rather than reading a play. When you watch the movie Fences, all those decisions have been made for you by the actors, by the directors. When you read it, you kind of have to question it. You kind of have to put it together in your head and envision it in your head. And so we get bits, like I mentioned last week, of Act 1, Scene 2, where Troy drops the N-word when it's just him and Rose. And in the script, when you read it, he drops the N-word and he pauses, and then he changes it to a different word. And you're kind of like, okay, why do you do that? But when you see it acted out, it makes perfect sense. When you see it acted out, he's using language that Rose doesn't approve of. And Viola Davis then gives Denzel a look, and Denzel's like, yeah, sorry. And he changes what he says. So he's not using as harsh language when it's just him and his wife. course, then he slips up, and literally the next line of dialogue, he does it again, and she just kind of rolls her eyes and goes along with it. But all that is in the performance. It's not in the script. And that's kind of the joy then of watching the film rather than just reading the play. My favorite bit, I think, though, that shows so much more weight is the very, very end here. Raynell comes outside after Rose and Corey have had it out. And Rose is telling Corey, you're going to your dad's funeral. Corey's processing. Corey's not sure if he really is going to go to his dad's funeral or not. He's still processing. And Raynell comes out. This is his little sister that he knew like when she was a baby, but then he got kicked out of the house, and so he hasn't really connected with her. And she has dropped some kind of things about like, I've got your football in the closet. Daddy referred to my room as Corey's room. And that's part of helping Corey process, okay, my dad did talk about me. My dad did care about me. When he kicked me out of the house, it wasn't like I was out of his life forever. He talked about me fondly, even. And he's processing that. Raynell says, are you in the Army or the Marines? He says Marines. Raynell says, Papa said Army. So Troy was talking about Corey to Raynell. Got it wrong, which branch of the service he was in, but again, talking about him favorably. But then Raynell says, did you know Blue? Corey says, who's Blue? Raynell says, Papa's dog that he sing about all the time. And Corey's like, oh yeah, I remember that. And he starts to sing the song. Just going with it, remembering this song that his dad used to sing when he was little, and that Raynell knows it too, and they start to bond in this moment. And what they're bonding over is shared experience of the same father that Corey has thought of negatively all this time and bore such a grudge towards him because of how he was treated. As Corey starts to soften, and it's all because of Raynell. And so much beautiful acting is happening there between Giovanna Depo and I know her last name's Sydney, because I always want to say her name's Sydney, but that's her last name. It's Sanaya Sydney, I think is her name, who plays Raynell. If you read it on the page, it's just lyrics to the song. That Corey and Raynell are singing the song together. Blue treated possum out on a limb. Blue looked at me and I looked at him. Grabbed that possum, put him in a sack. Blue stayed there till I came back. Old Blue's feet was big and round. But then we get to this bit. Old Blue died and I dug his grave with a silver spade. Let him down with golden chain. Every night I call his name. Go on, Blue, you good dog, you. And when you watch it, you see Corey's getting choked up. When the song transitions to being about the death of the dog, on the day that they're about to put their father in the ground, in his grave, he starts thinking about his dad, and you can see it on his face, and he gets choked up, and he can't go on singing. Raynell, it's just a song. For Raynell, she's just singing, hey, it's fun, let's sing the song. And so, go on, Blue, you good dog, you. Go on, Blue, you good dog, you. And it says Raynell now. Corey stopped singing. Blue laid down and died like a man. Blue laid down and died. That repetition is Raynell saying, hey, you stopped singing. Come on, you're supposed to keep singing with me. And so then he joins back in. Blue laid down and died like a man. Now he's treating possums to the promised land. If you read it, you don't get it. You don't get the emotion. It doesn't make as much sense. But when you watch it, man, that scene is so powerful. You can see how choked up Corey is getting, how he's processing his feelings about his father as he's bonding with Raynell. And so then we get to this line. They finish singing. Corey says, "You go on in the house and change them shoes like Mama told you so we can go to Papa's funeral." We. This right here is when he has made the decision, okay, I'm going to go. And it's not because of what Rose said to him. It's because of this moment with Raynell. And Raynell says, "Okay, I'll be back." And she leaves. And in the film, she hugs him before she leaves. And the look on her face when she hugs him and the look on his face when he's getting hugged. Like I'm starting to get choked up just thinking about it. It's powerful, and it's powerful acting moment that isn't really in the script. And so watch it. That's why we watch the movie. Rather than just read the play and talk about the play. Why we would go ahead and watch the movie, because you can see those subtleties. And it shows you the way this should be acted out. And you can feel the emotions more strongly. So, all of that then kind of leads us to, when you write about the play for your essay, again, due in 2 weeks, your essay on the play Fences is due in 2 weeks. You have a lot of different options that you can take. You can either go about a theme, or you can look at a character. And in looking at a character, probably the two that you're going to be drawn to the most are going to be Rose or Troy. And I've got notes on Blackboard that are going over this. We've only got about like half an hour left of class at this point. And so we're going to go through as many of those notes as we can. But those notes are on Blackboard, and they're there to help you when it's time for you to write your paper. What direction do you want to take it in? It's going to be up to you. So I think we'll start with Rose, talking about the character of Rose, because I think that a lot of people are drawn to her character. One, because Viola Davis's performance in the film is so strong and absolutely worthy of the Oscar that she won for that performance. But two, she's likable. She is, in a lot of ways, she's the protagonist. You would be forgiven for thinking at the beginning of the play that Troy is the main character of the movie, of the play, because Denzel Washington has the most lines. Denzel directed the film. He's the one that the movie starts with. And we like Troy a lot in those early scenes. But where the conflict begins is when he gets Corey kicked off the football team. He reveals to Rose he's having the affair. And you realize, oh, this guy's the bad guy. This guy's the antagonist. He's the villain. And Rose is the protagonist. Rose is the hero. She is the center of the family. Now, everybody in the family is connected to Troy. They're in the family because of Troy. It's Troy's best friend, Bono. It's Troy's child from a previous relationship, Lyons. It's Troy's brother, Gabe. But Rose is the heart. Rose is the center of the wheel that keeps all the spokes in line and keeps things turning. She's the glue that holds the family together. She's the one that wants the fence to be built around the yard to keep her family close, to protect them. This family is what she's always wanted. You know, one of the themes that you could examine about this play is hopes and dreams. And you could kind of tie that back to when we read Harlem and talk about dream deferred. Troy's dreams are deferred. Corey's dreams are deferred. Rose's dreams come true. Rose's dreams were of a family. She wanted a family of people that she could keep close. She says as much when Troy's confronting her about the affair. She didn't want no half nothing in her family. All of her family is, you can't talk about papa and mama. It's either your papa, your mama, my papa, my mama. And she didn't want that. She wanted a family for herself. And yet, she's got Lyons as part of that family. Lyons is not her child by blood. Sometimes people get confused by that when they're writing their papers. And I have to kind of correct them. Like, no, Rose is not Lyons' mom. Rose is technically Lyons' stepmom and has only known Lyons as a grown man. But you wouldn't know that because of the way that Rose treats him. And that is largely symbolized by food. Rose is a caregiver. And like a lot of women of that generation, of that time period, one of the big ways that she shows her love is through food. How many of you, your grandmas, you can't go over to visit your grandma without her like just plying you with food? Is that true? When my grandma was still with me, that was true. I've got one other grandma that's still around, and every Thanksgiving it's like, hey, take leftovers. You need to take this. One, because she's made so much food, but she loves it, and she loves me, and that's how she shows it. So Lyons comes around. Hey, Lyons, you want to stick around for dinner? That's going to be more work for her. It's not like she's prepared food already. She's prepared food for her and Troy and Corey. It's going to be more work for her to then bring Lyons in. Or Bono, every time Bono is there. Hey, you want to stick around? You staying for dinner, Bono? Every time. Happy to feed him. Doesn't even question it. The biggest example is Gabe. First time we meet Gabe, she expresses worry that Gabe isn't eating well now that he's moved out of the house. She asks Gabe if Gabe's hungry. Gabe says, I'll take some biscuits. And Rose turns around and walks back into the house and starts making biscuits from scratch. Not that she goes to the fridge and pops open and like it explodes everywhere. No, she starts baking biscuits from scratch. Doesn't even question it. Of course I would do that for you. Because I love you, I care about you. And then Troy cheats on her. And she then still is taking care of everybody else's needs. But her care goes from, I've baked for you, to I've baked a cake for the bake sale at the church. Yet she still says, your dinner's in there on the oven, you got to reheat it, to Troy. She still cares a little bit about him. Even after his betrayal, she's still like, you're technically still my husband, and I still do care about you enough to make sure you eat. But I'm not going to make you something special. You got to reheat it yourself. And it shows that shift. And a lot of people kind of don't understand sometimes why Rose stayed. But I think it's pretty simple to understand a couple different reasons why Rose stayed. One, by the end, absolutely. Some time passes and she has forgiven him for what he's done. At first, she's pretty angry. Rightfully so. She's hurt by Troy's betrayal. And that scene, again, Viola Davis is killing it in that scene. What about me, she says. What about my life, my hopes, my dreams? When Troy comes home with Raynell from the hospital, Alberta has died. Troy has this baby that Rose at first wants nothing to do with. Says, what are you telling me that, Troy? But then she stops and she thinks about it and she realizes this child needs her. And she says, see if I can find that bit. Act 2, Scene 3, I believe. There it is. Okay, Troy, you're right. I'll take care of your baby for you because, like you say, she's innocent. And you can't visit the sins of the father upon the child. A motherless child has got a hard time. From right now, this child got a mother, but you a womanless man. And in that moment, she's saying, I'm not taking care of this child because you want me to. I'm taking care of this child because this child needs me. I'm taking care of this child because I want to. I'm deciding how things go from here on out. You a womanless man, she says. We are still married on paper. We are husband and wife, but we're not really married anymore. I'm not your woman anymore. It's her taking some agency, as much agency as she can, being a black woman in the 1950s. The reality of it is she realizes her position in the world, her position in life. If she divorces Troy, what's her life going to be? Super hard. She's going to be a single mother on her own. Corey's probably going to go with her. But how's she going to take care of Corey and herself? She's going to have to get a job. And what's that job probably going to be for a black woman in the 1950s? A maid. Cooking and cleaning, now not for her family, but for strangers. White strangers. And for pennies, for very little money. So she could instead stay with Troy and continue to keep the life that she's always wanted. And basically say, this is my dream. This is what I've always wanted. I'm not going to let you and your dumb mistakes screw it up for me. So I'm staying. And I've had people say that she's afraid to leave. No, she's not afraid to leave. She's got the strength not to leave. She's got the strength to say, I call the shots from here on out. And she says as much in the end when she's talking to Corey. This big long bit here. What she wanted out of life, she spells out. When I first met your daddy, I thought, here's a man I can lay down with and make a baby. That's what she wants. She's always wanted a family. She's always wanted kids. And she had Corey. And he gave her that. And that's what she wanted out of life. Here's a man that can fill all them empty spaces you've been tipping around the edges of. One of them empty spaces was being somebody's mother. It was my life. I didn't have to live it like that. But that's what life offered me in the way of being a woman, and I took it. I grabbed hold of it with both hands. She realizes I'm a woman in this time, and I got to take what life has dealt me. I got to make the best hand I can out of the cards that I've got. And she says, by the time Raynell came into the house, me and your daddy had done lost touch with one another. I didn't want to make my blessing off of nobody's misfortune, but I took on to Raynell like she was all them babies I had wanted and never had. Like I'd been blessed to relive a part of my life. And if the Lord see fit to keep up my strength, I'm going to do her just like your daddy did you. I'm going to give her the best of what's in me. So Rose in that bit is saying, I took Raynell because it's what I wanted. I wanted to continue being a mother. And you were about out of the house. But what I wanted out of life was to be a mother. And here's this baby being handed to me. Yeah, she's not my flesh and blood, but that doesn't matter. I'm her mother. She's my daughter. And I'm going to raise her that way. And you see that. You see that in how Raynell talks to her in the end. Raynell doesn't think of her as, you're my stepmom. You're my mom. The only mom she's ever known her whole life. That step doesn't matter. She takes Raynell for herself. And again, she's a good person. She's doing this out of the goodness of her heart. If you want the best evidence that she's a good person, go back to Act 1, Scene 2. When we first get introduced to Gabe, Gabe talks about her in this way in that scene, where he says, when I died and went to heaven, I met St. Peter at the gates, and he showed me his book. He showed me your name, Troy, in the book. You had it under M. He said, I know him, that's my brother. And he says then, he got Rose's name in the book. I ain't seen it like I seen yours, but I know it's in there. Gabe doesn't need to see Rose's name in the book to know she's going to heaven. Of course Rose is going to go to heaven. Rose is a good person. So again, if you're going to write about Rose's character for your essay, the Fences essay we got due in 2 weeks, and you wanted to write about Rose's character, I think you got a lot that you could say about Rose's character to demonstrate why she's such a good person and the choices that she makes and the things that she does. You could easily get a paragraph out of her providing food for everybody. You could get a paragraph about her reaction to the affair and a paragraph about how she is with Raynell. Intro, conclusion, boom, 800 words.